All right, so then I'll take it a step further. Let me ask you this question: Biden hasn't been the president for a year yet. Um, it seems like forever, but I say that to it seems like forever. I was reading a Twitter thread the other day that kind of pointed say this. I say this accomplished without these two bills that are fighting out the stuff that we've already FDR and Lyndon B. Johnson combined that might come in here. It's the biggest piece of legislation maybe in the history of at least the modern history of our politics. And then I also saw and looked back the numbers of the Obama stimulus when he first. This is 3 trillion, right? The auto industry in Michigan and Wisconsin. And I wonder if he is chased for what is it about or Dems in disarray that causes us to lose focus. Sports fan, your team is favored and you might be facing a team that's not that good. And you might win 24-21. It was probably a little harder than you wanted to, but you still got the W. And the coach goes on the podium and they're like, why was this a struggle game? And the coach is always like, any team can beat you anytime. This is a professional and everybody is good. And this is supposed to be hard. And the fact that we came out with a W is still good. My question becomes this. The Dems in disarray, I know you hate that kind of plot. And sometimes I don't do it on the pod, but privately I text you like, this is frustrating, you know? But isn't this supposed to be what it's all about? Is the checks and balances, is the negotiations. It's supposed to be this way, right? It's not supposed to be everybody's like the Republicans do it that way where whatever Mitch says goes, or now whatever Trump says goes. Do you think that there's nuance there, or do you think that it's just going to look bad on the back end? Does that make sense?
No, well, yeah, well, I think there's a few things, and I want to make sure I address all of the what you said, but also all that I thought. I think one of the things that, and I'm going to make an admission here, and this is going to shock folks who, and I've always said I'm to the left of most progressives. It's just that I'm more pragmatic, so I come off as a moderate. But first and foremost, one of the things that we need to do immediately, one of the things that I think is really important is that we go ahead and acknowledge the role of the progressives. Um, I've felt at times they were maybe doing some grandstanding and they would be, that they were potentially not being team players. But I also realized that, but for the progressives, we wouldn't have the 1.75 billion Build Back Better. Now, granted, it's not as large as they wanted. They were, Bernie originally went at 6 billion and went down to 3.5 trillion. We landed at 1.75 trillion. Um, but without the progressives holding the line, I don't think that we would be getting what we got. If we had just gone ahead and passed infrastructure, would it have just been lip service and just a little bit of dancing around until we actually, um, you know, uh, you know, if we would have ever seen it? So the progressives deserve a lot of credit for that. So I do think that the sausage making, while it potentially turned off a lot of people, in the long run, it's going to benefit a lot of people. Now, will it benefit Democrats? In the short term, it may actually backfire because of the infighting. But I think once people can receive their child tax credit checks and some of the other benefits, are they going to sit there and say, Cory Bush grandstanded too much? Are they going to be upset about this or that? And will the people forget about it by this time next year? So that's that. I think that you start out that last passage with something that I really want to address about the media and the whole Dims and disarray. The most frustrating thing for me in a lot of ways is how the press continues to try to spin stuff as bad for Democrats, or how they're, or and its purpose. I'm not sure if you actually did you hear about the whole or see the whole controversy around Casey Hunt, formerly of MSNBC,
I,
now
I, I
CNN. Did
knew
you
it
hear
was on the
about this
timeline.
tweet that she
I
put
lost
out?
it and I couldn't get a hold of it, so I didn't want to go back and even try. Yeah.
Well, she got ratioed on this one. Um, once we started learning about what was potentially in the bill and the fact that paid leave was going to be out or potentially out, Casey Hunt tweeted, "If paid leave is left out of this bill, I'm going to spend the midterms covering how suburban women who turned on the GOP over Trump are responding to Democratic governing in D.C., especially after the pandemic." Now, what she is basically saying is, if the Democrats don't include this, I'm going to go ahead and basically make news, and really ask people how they feel about Democrats dropping the ball on this. Let's let's be honest, Casey. 48 Democrats support paid leave. 50 Republicans don't. But you're going to go ahead and lay this on the feet of the Democrats, meaning that this is potentially one of the most significant victories in probably not since the Affordable Care Act, and I'm not sure how it rates in comparison. Is it, only time will tell whether it's more significant or less significant than the Affordable Care Act. Nonetheless, it is huge, and she's zeroing in on the one frame that's negative for the Democrats. All this other stuff that's going to be in there, if any of those planks had passed in previous administrations by themselves, they would have been big news. We're we're talking about $500 billion invested in the climate. So I do think, and one of the things, I want to stay on Build Back Better, but I'm going to do a sidebar over to the Virginia race. It's tightening. I feel good. A little anxious, but I feel good. I've talked to a few people, some people on the ground in Virginia, and some people who are party people, and there's cautious optimism about it. Now, just like with the midterms, where you know how they say the midterms, the party in power loses, I've heard this, you may have heard this. Whatever party has the White House, traditionally, the other party in Virginia wins the governor's mansion. That's kind of a practice, just like, okay. So what does that tell you? Is that tells you that realistically, if McAuliffe were to lose, all that's happening is what has happened for years. But that's going to be spun into what? The Dems really screwed the pooch, blah, blah, blah. But here's the question, Fady, is do you think if McAuliffe holds on, will this be a bigger negative frame for the Republicans? Because, quite frankly, if the trend is that the party out of power wins the governor's mansion, if McAuliffe holds on, shouldn't there be doom and gloom Republicans in disarray stories that pop up, or will the narrative been, if McAuliffe pulls out a squeaker, it should have never been in doubt. It should have never been that close, as opposed to the fact that McAuliffe technically is the one who shocked the world by winning this election. So, what are your thoughts on what I just said there?